Hi, it's Ian Griffith, and I'm here with Allison Falan, and we are talking about her new book that she's going to put out. Now, I first got to know Allison at Date with Destiny. She was there, and then I also saw her at Business Mastery. And I know that really had a major effect on you, and now you have this amazing book coming out. It's called Sugar Baby, and I know we're going to talk about it soon. But first, I'd like to talk to you about how did Tony Robbins and all these events affect you getting this book out so shortly after?
Oh my God. So Tony Robbins just changed my life. We've heard that a million times, right? But it was really like a 1-2 punch that just like exploded everything open to do Date with Destiny and then Business Mastery. I had actually written a lot of this book, but I had this, just this hang up where I hadn't quite finished it. Like I wrote it all the way almost to completion. And there was just this fear of like being seen or whatever. And it was the final thing that exploded everything open was at Business Mastery and I'm sure I'd heard this a couple times before, but sometimes you have to hear it again and again before it gets through. But where Tony Robbins said, the number one problem with businesses is the psychology of the owner. Yes. And I was like, that's it. That's completely it. That's the entire thing that's going wrong here and why I don't have the success that I really want yet. And I really need to look at that. So I looked at I was actually afraid of success or afraid of being seen or afraid of, the people who won't like the book or the people, it was just a million things going on. And I just really honed in on that.
That's so great. And that's such a big part of what he teaches, which is that when we get over our fear of rejection, we can really start going after it. So you just basically sat down with yourself. You said, all right, I'm going to do this no matter what. And you just started writing. You just finished it up.
Yeah. I mean, funny story, actually. I was still in Florida for like the business. I think it was the day after Business Mastery that I was like, it's time to do it. I have to actually do this. And even though the book wasn't completely finished yet, I started advertising for it. And I was like, well, what would be, using all the things we learned at Business Mastery, who's my target audience? What's going to appeal to them the most? And I was like, well, I need a model. I need this kind of graphics. I need this. And I was like, well, I model. So I literally took a selfie and like digitally altered it and turned it into what ended up being the book cover, a version of it. And I posted online. And I was like, the book is coming on this date. Really
That's great.
Yeah, it started this momentum that just like shortly after that, the book was finished, of course, because then there's like, close to 8,000 fans who expect it on a certain date.
Right. You put a lot of leverage on yourself. And I love how you got yourself to be as part of this. One thing we learned at Business Mastery is to take action now, right? Just to take massive action and just get out there.
Yeah, my whole team, because we have our companies from Business Mastery. My whole company was like, good job on the massive action.
Yeah, absolutely.
I posted it everywhere I could, all over social media. I basically just threw a date out there of when this is going to be all completed by. So.
That's great. Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's tell everyone a little bit about Allison.
Okay.
How long have you been writing?
So I've been writing since before I knew how to spell. Like the second I learned how to trace the alphabet, I was like, I need to do this. I really need to do this. And I would write these little books. I mean, I called them books. They were little pieces of paper that I taped together. I didn't know how to spell, and I didn't want any adult to know the story until it was done. So I would go from adult to adult asking, how do you spell this word? How do you spell this word? How do you spell this word? And they were like, they're probably like 5-sentence stories, but then I would tape them together and I would present my books to people. And then I wrote my first actual novel in 3rd grade. It was 198 pages.
Wow.
And it was written in the style of R.L. Stine, who was my favorite author at the time. So it was like horror. I've always had this like, very wild imagination. Mm-hmm. And, I was only 9 then in 3rd grade. I didn't really understand what the whole concept of what publishing would even mean. So I just showed it to one of my teachers and she just fell in love with it. And the kids in my class also fell in love with it. So we would actually take class time every week to read a chapter aloud. And pretty much everyone died in the end, but everyone still loved it anyway. So
That's great. That's great. Actually, So there's a lot of books that are very popular like that right now. But that's so cool. And so you started getting into writing screenplays, right? And
Yes. Then around, I guess it was like 7 years ago, is when I decided to get my MFA in screenwriting. And it started actually a little before that. I did a 2-week, I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I had a bachelor's in philosophy, and I was kind of at that point where I was like, well, you know, a lot of us go through that. Like, we're like, well, now what? And I did a 2-week, I think it was 2-week long program just to see for screenwriting in LA at the New York Film Academy. And I was like, oh, this is it. This is it. I'm for sure doing this. Got my master's in screenwriting, and then I've spent the last 5 years doing that mostly. I've won 14 awards at this point for screenwriting. And about a year ago is when these different characters emerged. That they just had a lot more to say than would fit into a screenplay. Screenplays are wonderful. I love screenplays, but there's also something so satisfying about a book because you know your actual words. That's what you're trying to present to the public, as opposed to, you know, the whole collaborative process of making a short film or making a movie or making a TV show. You're really making those words for the other players in this collaborative process. And with a book, it just felt so good to look at that and say, wow, that's for the whole public.
Right. And there's something else, which is you get to know the characters that you're writing a lot more, right?
Yeah, a lot more closely, which was kind of a trip to do this. This is a crime thriller. So very intense to know these characters so closely. I actually already wrote the screenplay for this novel.
Okay.
I wrote the screenplay and then I was like, I'm not even close to done. Like, these characters are still talking and there's still so much more story here. So once I was writing the novel, parts of it were really fun because there's a lot of levity in it. And then other parts, you know, I can watch stuff like that on TV. I can read stuff like that. I can watch stuff like that in a movie. But actually sitting there and writing it in detail in a novel form, even writing the screenplay wasn't so intense. Writing the novel, there was one part, and I won't tell you what, but I actually had to run to the bathroom and throw up after. It was so intense.
That's good. You're really in it. You're all in.
Oh yeah, I write as if I'm acting. Like, I fully get into every single character. So if I have to get into the mind of a killer, I'll do it.
So tell me about this book, because it sounds really fun and exciting and fascinating. What is the premise of the book, and what journey would people expect to go on?
Okay, so the premise of the book, Sugar Baby, a novel, is about a charming, cheeky, and coquettish, big spending young lady who may or may not also be a deadly serial killer. And you really don't know that. You don't know whether she is or not. But people are dying throughout the book. And what really adds dimension to her character is that she falls in love for real with her sugar daddy, with her favorite sugar daddy. She falls in love with it. And it's, you know, the idea of what happens when a character like that, who may or may not be a deadly serial killer, actually falls in love. What does that look like? And what kind of journey does that take you on? Because the love is real, too. The love is very real, whether or not she's a killer. And the journey people can expect to go on, they can expect to laugh a lot just from the unexpected things that happen and they come out of people's mouths, and to be surprised a lot, and to also raise eyebrows quite a few times and open mouths in shock, because I've never seen anything written this way. The format of the book is also quite different. I deliberately wanted to write something that had a different rhythm to it than a regular novel after writing screenplays for 5 years. You know, I love reading screenplays. That was part of my job for a while, just to read them as quickly as possible. And they have a certain flow to them because I'm not exactly sure how to map that out why, but they do. They have a different flow and they're a lot of fun to read. And I was like, why aren't these published also? So it's not written like a screenplay, but it's got a different format to it that I've never seen before. I kind of feel like I invented the language
Oh, cool. That's interesting.
Yeah,
Do
very
you think
interesting.
it kind of flows faster, or
It flows faster, and it flows. It's meant to make the reader feel like the reader is also a character in the book.
that's great. And
Yeah.
is this a book where you might find out the answers to all your questions by the end of the book?
Oh, you find out your answers to most of your questions by the end of
Okay.
most of them, yes.
That's
And it's possibly just the first book in a series.
That's what I was going to ask, if you found a way to open it up.
Yeah, this character's not done talking. She like this is how I write usually is I'll have something will happen in real life, some small thing, and the book is no exception. And then from that small thing I start imagining, scenarios and things, and then suddenly the characters emerge, and once the characters are there, the whole story basically just kind of writes itself. I'm just kind of along for the ride. And with this one, it started with one very romantic moment in real life with my former partner who I was living with at the time, and he's in the entertainment industry too, so we're very creative, and like we made our love very creative and everything, and we created this framed declaration of love is what we called it, and we spent so much time on it, and it was so beautiful and also kind of intense, and we had it framed in like a little white frame, and I like put it on the wall. And I was sitting there on the edge of our bed one day alone, looking at it, just like thinking, like, wow, this is so wonderful. This is so nice. And I'm a very visual thinker. So, and this is just how my mind works, okay? And I was like, what an interesting scene this would be. This girl sitting here looking at this declaration of love. And then I was like, well, wouldn't it be even more interesting if my hands were covered in blood? And then like, well, wouldn't it be even more interesting if I was completely covered in blood? And then I started thinking, well, what would the story be behind that? And then who would that character have to be to create that story? And then these characters just popped up, and it's a wildly entertaining ride.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love that because, I mean, they'd have to be sentimental and psychotic at the same time.
That's what was so fun about it. Yeah.
And this is great because, you don't know that much about me, but I love writing, and I totally can get into how you can get into your character. So I have a question for you, and this might throw you a little off, but the character that you have in this book has this laugh that affects people. I noticed throughout our interview, you have quite an amazing laugh yourself.
Thank you.
Is there any connection between yourself and the character?
There's a little connection in that it's completely based on me, the laugh.
Okay, good.
So, funny story, we'll bring it back to Tony Robbins for that. At Date with Destiny, my amazing, you know how you're paired up with a partner, right in the beginning, like one partner, and people were just like commenting on my laugh the whole time, and I've always loved my own laugh, and people I get really close to always love my laugh, but I never had so many people being like, oh my God, you laugh. Like people at a Tony Robbins event are just so open and happy and uplifted and willing to share stuff like that. And I was like, I do have a pretty good laugh. That's amazing. And my partner even asked me, she was like, can I just record your laugh so that when I'm down, I'll just play it? And I was like, yeah, of course, yeah. And so we did that. And then I heard it back and I was like, that is an amazing laugh. And the bubbles comment, when I was in high school, a best friend of mine, a girl, said that to me about my laugh. And I was like, oh, that's going right into the book.
That's great. Yeah. And yeah, I agree with them. You have a great laugh. So
thank you so much.
So you definitely should put that in the audio book, the audio version of your book, right?
Yeah, I plan to. And the audio book, thanks for bringing that up. I already did a teaser I created with my best friend, who incidentally is the man I was dating at the time that whole thing came from, is now my best friend.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And he has an incredible voice too. And so we together recorded the teaser video for the novel. You can find it on YouTube. And I think that we are going to record the audiobook together. And I said, I want to make it a different kind of audiobook. We're not just going to read it, because it comes from two perspectives. It comes from the girl's perspective and his perspective.
Yeah.
So in the teaser, I already put tons of laughter in there. And it's going to be a very dynamic audiobook that's a lot more like a performance than, just reading.
Yeah,
So,
I heard that, and I think I noticed a kind of chemistry in your voices together. So like you had some history. So now it makes more sense. And I think that would be good for both of you to do that.
The audiobook we can probably expect more towards the end of July, even though the book itself comes out and goes live on July 2nd.
So do you have a cover for these books?
I do, yeah. Let me see. So these are the advanced reader copies, and we're doing contests where people can win copies of these, even though this is the exact same book, just a slightly different cover. And then these are the hardcover copies that you can buy at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and your local retailer on July 2nd.
Wow. Yeah, those look really nice. They really do.
And that's a digitally altered version of me from that first day after Business Mastery, where I was like, well, I don't have a model. And I was like, well, I am a model. So, because that's like a side gig is modeling.
Well, it makes total sense because, I noticed you're doing like 10 days left, 9 days left. You can continue to add more modeling pieces without having to get someone else involved. And that's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Content. So,
yeah.
Especially for multiple books. So can people get this on Amazon or is it just through hard booksellers?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iBooks, and your local retailer. All 4 of those on July 2nd. You can actually pre-order it. You can pre-order them on Amazon and iBooks and Barnes & Noble right now.
Okay. That's great.
And on July 2nd, you'll be able to actually get it.
Okay. And we're going to have this in Tony Robbins Fans. I'll put the link in there and wherever else you put it.
Absolutely. Yeah, the website that I created for the actual book has a link to all 3 of those, to Barnes & Noble, iBooks, Amazon. So,
and I'm looking, it's called Sugar Baby. Wait, what is it?
The link is sugarbabynovel.com.
Sugar Baby Novel, that's what it is.
Yeah, and that'll take you to the page where you can just pick and choose. If you have Barnes & Noble Nook, or you just like Barnes & Noble books better for some reason, you can do them, or Amazon or iBooks.
So, everyone has the same issue that you had. Everyone that goes to Tony Robbins, they have something they want to give to the world, whether it be through coaching or whether they have a company they want to put something in. There's something that's keeping them from what they want, and they go to Tony Robbins to get through that. And what I love about writing a book is it's cut and dry. It's kind of like lifting weights is to coaching, right? Because it's either you create the content or you don't. Some other things. So I wanted to say, what's one piece of advice you could give to people to get them to have a completed piece of work to give to the world?
Wow. A completed piece, because that's the key, completed.
Right.
Work and work and work and work. And I did it. I worked and worked and worked and worked. And then that last little bit, you can hold off forever if you wanted to.
You can.
Let's see. What really did it was as you know, Business Mastery comes with the free coaching, 6 weeks of free coaching.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And the first session with my coach is actually what really knocked it home, because he was like, well, you have to ask yourself, why is the book not finished? What's stopping you from finishing the book? And I sat there and I was like, I don't know if we're allowed to curse on here, but I don't effing know. I don't know. And then I sat there and I was like, well, I'll just do it. I don't mean to steal from Nike, but just do it. Just create the product. And I also highly recommend what also came from Tony Robbins. It wasn't actually directly from him, but it was from my wonderful recruiter, Mo. Mo Salami is the one who got me into Tony Robbins in the first place. He works for him. And he's the one who suggested, he said, I've seen it a million times again and again, release the first chapter. And then you get this huge upswelling of support. And that really is part of what drove it. I would say release a teaser and a deadline. And don't just give it to yourself, give it to the public. So that you've got this huge, whether or not you care what people think of you, you have this huge upswell of momentum that starts really rolling in. And suddenly people are saying, I can't wait to read your book. I can't wait to read your book. I can't wait. Even just seeing a bunch of likes on the cover is like, oh, I got to do this. I need to effing do this now. So.
That's great. And it's so true. You know, we get stuck in this kind of our own private world and we are afraid to take a step forward. But we really, you know, and I like to do that too, commit ahead of time. So
it makes it real.
Yeah. And gets your emotion into it too. Because when you're writing it for you, there's only so much you can do. But when you start getting those other people, it starts to be about more than you. You're like, I got to finish this so everyone can read it.
Yeah.
It's gonna be awesome, right?
Yeah. You know, I was working with, I was working with different publishers, and a couple of them wanted to push it. And I was like, I cannot let all my fans down. I'm done now.
Yes.
So I went with the one who could deliver.
Yes.
By second.
And this is the big thing with a lot of artists or speakers, and when you start to get to a point where you feel like you're contributing, where you're giving to the world, where you're kind of almost like a servant or a vessel for a message that's going out, then you can just flow. You can let it flow through you. And
oh my God, yeah. I'm so happy you said that. That was actually the first piece that helped me more than anything at Date with Destiny rather than Business Mastery. That was like the first domino, was when he talked about, you know, the values and what are our top 3 out of the main, I think 6, right?
Yeah.
And talking about, you know, what are your actual 3? What are the 3 that you put at the top? And, you know, the entertainment industry, they make you very significant. Every time you win something, you're made so significant. You go around, you talk to people, and it's wonderful. It's fun. But I had kind of gotten confused there a little bit, because that's not really my top value at all. My top value was contribution. And the way I contribute is by wildly entertaining people. Yes. So once I got focused on that, then that's when like the book was almost finished, just from that.
Absolutely. And here's the funny thing, and I'll just leave us with this, but we all search for significance, all of us. We all want it. Yes. But when we stop searching for it, when we start going to contribution, that's when we actually can gain the most significance.
That's such a good point. Yeah. That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for finishing the book. That's very awesome and significant. And it is. And I can't wait to read it. It sounds like a really fun book.
Yes, thanks so much for asking me to do this interview.
Yeah, is there any last thing you'd like to tell anyone before we go?
I think that pretty much covers it. Just that you can read, you know, Kindle, Barnes & Noble, Nook, iBooks. They're all different formats. You can get all of them. And hardcover and softcover, all available on July 2nd. And then the audiobook, we're hoping you can expect that by the end of July.
Okay.
And sugarbabynovel.com.
This is great. And thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. And I can't wait till we hear about the book. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Ian. Bye.